What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? It's week 2, cashing points. Graham Barfield couldn't make it, so it's me, Scott Barrett, and Ryan Heath this week. Scott, it's been a minute. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here. Very, very honored you guys would consider me as for Graham's replacement.
Yeah, we are. We're very happy to have you. What about you, Ryan? How you doing?
Hey, doing great, man. Ready for week 2. Got some actual football, actual data to talk about. It's not just all the same summer storylines now. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, week 2 is always the week of overreaction. So difficult game balancing, what happened in week 1 versus what happened last year versus our preseason expectations. We are about to get into all of the main slate games from a DFS perspective. Let's kick it off with the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. Giants are 4.5-point dog in this one. Total here is 44.5. On the injury front, Wan'Dale Robinson is dealing with an ankle issue. He's questionable. I do expect him to end up playing here. Andrew Thomas listed as doubtful for New York as well. Dak Prescott is the cheapest he's been on DraftKings since week 13 of 2019. That was about 6 years ago. Over his last 3 fully healthy seasons, he's averaged 22.3 DraftKings fantasy points per game. I really like Dak here. And Ryan, I know you had a couple very encouraging notes in advanced matchups about Dak's pass catchers.
Yeah, I love Dak here. I love the Dak double stack just with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. So really the schematic angle here is that both of those guys are much better against single high looks. They have been for pretty much their entire careers. It was true last year. It was very true for CeeDee Lamb in week 1 with the few that they saw. So yeah, I think it's pretty easy double stack. That's kind of all it is. You really just need to hope that this game stays close enough that they have to throw. Good to utilize a bring back on the other side. I'm into Malik Neighbors, obviously, just because of the amount of volume that he saw in week 1. And then also Theo Johnson at 2,900 kind of deserves a look here, has also a favorable schematic matchup with all the cover 3, all the zone that Matt Eberflus likes to play and like what he did in week 1. So yeah, this is one of the few spots that I feel really good about a schematic angle this early in the year, just because we have seen both these defensive coordinators kind of do that for a full season. They don't really ever switch anything up. So yeah, best schematic matchup, best spot there is just the Dak double.
Yeah, I do expect a bit higher of a pass rate from Dallas in this one in general, just because, last week Dak acknowledged that as soon as Jalen Carter got ejected, they were attacking on the ground with Javonte Williams. And Scott, I know you were DMing me and Ryan last night with some Javonte Williams love. I do think he's a guy you can work into stacks here. Do you have anything you want to add on Javonte or this game in general?
Yeah, I kind of see this game pretty differently than you guys. I mean, I like it a lot, but I don't think this is a great spot for Malik Neighbors, who I think is like easily one of the top 3 best wide receivers in football. Like, I think we could already have the, is he better than Justin Jefferson conversation. I know that sounds crazy, but love the player. Do not love the quarterback. I think Russell Wilson looked like the worst quarterback in football last week. And I don't love the matchup. Matt Eberflus. Well, you had AJ Brown throwing shade at me. He, on the Jordan Schultz podcast, said, yeah, I saw your tweets about how I can't separate and I'm probably hurt. I'm not hurt. I'm fully healthy. It's just the Eagles played a lot of cloud coverage. I didn't see a single man rep and they sold out to stop me and it worked. And yeah, that's what we know about Matt Eberflus. His defense is always sold out to stop the opposing team's number 1. So I don't think this is a good matchup for him. You know me, I'm Wan'Dale Robinson's biggest hater. I always say I'd rather lose $1 million than win $1 million with Wan'Dale on my DraftKings lineup. This is a great spot for him. He's not fully healthy. We can keep monitoring. I don't know if he got in a full practice today or not, but this would be a great spot for him. And it also would be a great spot for Theo Johnson, 2,900. But more than anything, to me, I think the Giants just get absolutely slaughtered. I think, under 100 yards from scrimmage is firmly in play. And so I really like Javonte Williams stacked with the Dallas Cowboys defense. Javonte's usage was insane. He had an 80% snap share, 71% route share, and Dallas was 83% run heavy inside the red zone. And so I really like that stack, Javonte Williams, Cowboys defense. Not a lot of people are chasing it. I will say I do like Dak doubles as well. I also like CeeDee Lamb more as, as a one-off for non-Dak lineups. But I do think there is potential in this game. Just me. I think I like Javonte Dallas defense most of all.
Yeah, I don't mind the Javonte angle. We were talking a little bit in our projections meeting this morning. I think you can play Javonte with Dak, and there's a chance Dallas just puts up 40 and everybody gets home there. My pushback, Scott, on Malik Neighbors is that he had a Christian McCaffrey-esque workload last week through the air, 28.5 expected fantasy points. McCaffrey was at 30.3. Neighbors only 7,100. That feels pretty good if we're going to get him at
that's
12
a
to 15%
really strong
ownership.
counter.
Right. I mean, I think the volume could overwhelm, even if it is a bad matchup, even if the defense does sell out to stop them. There's just,
it's just a tough week. Like there's so many players we wrote up. And so like anything I can do to, kind of identify a ceiling limiting performance just to kind of cross a name off, I'm going to look for that. But yeah, you're right. It's you look at XFP, it was CMC, it was Malik Neighbors, and it was Drake London, and then it was no one else came close.
Yep. Think we covered everything in this game. We can move on to the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Buffalo is a 6.5 point favorite here. Total is 46.5. Only injury note, this isn't particularly fantasy relevant, but Josh Reynolds was ruled out due to a hamstring issue. He logged a 92% route share in week 1. Ryan, one guy that I'm really excited about in this game more and more is Josh Allen. In week 17 of last season, Josh Allen played the Jets and was 8,500. Now just 7,100 against a new look Jets defense. I know you talked about this a bit in advanced matchups.
Yeah, so the first thing with Josh Allen is like he's awesome and he can break any slate, and it feels nice to get him at that price. As you're saying, 40 DraftKings points in 3 of his last 5 regular season games. But when you look at the matchup, anytime we get an Aaron Glenn defense against these rushing quarterbacks, you have to pay attention because all of them just go off on him on the ground. Over the last 3 years, we have 12 games where Glenn is facing a hypermobile quarterback. They're averaging over 76 rushing yards per game, up from 44 of that group in all their other games. That's a group including like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts, like all the hypermobile guys. That's what that split is. And almost 28 DraftKings fantasy points per game against these Aaron Glenn defenses versus an average of 21.5. So we always see a boost against these guys. Glenn did the exact same thing in week 1 that he always did with the Lions, which is a ton of blitzing, a ton of man coverage, which is kind of the mechanism behind why all these rushing quarterbacks go off against him. So yeah, Allen is one of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. I'm going to be building a lot of lineups around him. The only tricky thing is who you stack him with. So everybody is going to want to go to Keon Coleman after that performance he just had in week 1, and understandably so. It's a solid schematic matchup. He was pretty good against man coverage last year, just in terms of his splits. But we are tracking a potential Sauce Gardner shadow here after he shadowed Metcalf in week 1. Coleman also likely to have a lot more ownership than any of these other Bills receivers. So I kind of like Josh Palmer as a pivot here, who is someone that just kind of nobody is talking about. But his target per route run against man coverage was almost 50% better last year. He was top 10 in ass against man coverage, above guys like Puka Nacua. So the Josh Allen to Josh Palmer stack is very nice. Allen to Coleman, a little more popular, but still very nice. So yeah, I'm just kind of all over the Bills side of this. And then it's really just a question of, are you going Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson as the bring back?
Yeah, I thought that was a really good breakdown of the Bills side. Really like both Coleman and Palmer. I know you mentioned that we are potentially projecting a Sauce Gardner shadow. I think pretty big drop off between the gap of DK Metcalf to Calvin Austin versus Keon Coleman to Josh Palmer. So they might just let Sauce play aside. in this contest. The nice thing is, Josh Allen is going to probably end up as one of the 5-6 most popular quarterbacks on the slate. None of these wide receivers, including Coleman, who we have projected for the highest ownership on the team at 10%, are looking particularly popular. So it's pretty easy to bring down your total ownership of a Josh Allen stack. Scott, I'm curious, on the other side of this game, any interest in Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson as a run back? I think Breece Hall is the quintessential, and we actually just got a YouTube comment about this that and I've heard a lot of people talk about this on shows, but he really feels like a guy who's just not going to project well, but it's very easy to see him ripping off a couple 40-yard touchdowns and breaking this slate wide open after he looked really good last week.
Yeah, I did just want to say I agreed with Ryan on Josh Palmer being the better play. Keon Coleman, I think, gets neutralized by a Sauce Gardner shadow. I feel pretty confident in that. Also, he had a 0% separation win rate last week, and his touchdown came on a deflected pass. But Garrett Wilson, not really all that exciting to me, even in a bring back, I think, just because the Buffalo Bills have a way of really, limiting ceiling outcomes for wide receivers. They allow nothing deep, but who knows, maybe he could have like a PPR scam performance. And then Breece Hall, he ran 7 routes last week, 28% route share. I worry we may be overstating his impact. And, it was still a committee. It was better than we were looking for. But you can argue back against this. Ed Oliver's out, and Buffalo already was a top run funnel. Gave up the 6th most fantasy points per game to running backs last year. And we know the Jets want to run the ball a lot. I would say Breece would be my recommended bring back, but I probably don't like him as much as you do, Jake.
Yeah, so my thing with Breece is I'm a little worried when we get Sunday morning ownership projections that he could go from 5% to 12, 13, 14. And at that point, I can't really say that I'd be particularly interested. I think you can just play Josh Allen with, 1 or 2 of his wide receivers and roll with that. But this is a really, really good spot for Allen. Really quick, wanted to mention Justin Fields. He, led the slate in fantasy scoring last week. The ball's probably going to be in his hands a lot more this week. We have the Jets projected for almost a 60% pass rate after they went incredibly run heavy last week, largely because of this spread. We expect New York to play from behind. Scott, do you have any interest in Justin Fields? I thought he'd be projecting to be a little bit more popular at this point in the week because he does project as a decent value overall at 5,700.
I assumed he would be the cash quarterback throughout the industry, just after what we saw last week. Looks like he's still top 3 in our stuff. How does he project around the industry?
Still pretty well. I think, Mac Jones is pretty firmly going to be the cash quarterback at this point at just 4K. I have a hard time seeing anybody getting away from that. But yeah, Justin Fields, it's tricky. I'm still not sure what I want to do with Fields, which was part of the reason I was asking you. But.
Right. I kind of think there's better plays, but you just look at what he did last week, and I'm regretting not making him my Exodia quarterback for the season.
Yeah, I certainly think that's fair. He's one of those guys where I just really want to be pretty sensitive to ownership. I'm probably going to play, in a 150 set. I'll probably always get to 2 to 4% Justin Fields, and then if he ends up being 8 or 9%, I will just
we're coming off of a monster game, but historically Justin Fields is always like such a roller coaster ride in terms of having him on your fantasy roster.
Yeah, exactly. I think we covered just about everything in that game. Let's move on to another game with a pretty notable spread here. Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. Browns are 11.5 point underdogs here. Total is 45.5. Quinshon Judkins questionable for Cleveland. Isaiah Likely out once again for Baltimore. Scott, I think the Cleveland side of this game is really, really interesting. It doesn't look like as many people want to play Joe Flacco as they did last week. Flacco's still 5K. Basically everyone on the Cleveland side projects as a decent value. Njoku, Fannin, Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy. Do you have any interest in going back to our boy Joe Flacco here?
I kind of don't, to be honest. I was very in on this last week. Now I feel like a little less. And I was so excited about Jerry Jeudy. I thought he was going to go off David Njoku potentially. citing Joe Flacco's splits 2 years ago, Jameis Winston splits last year, where the wide receiver one averaged over 100 yards per game. David Njoku was putting up T. Higgins numbers. And I wonder if that was like partially due to, Flacco not being the starter and like coming in and just like locking on to the two guys he trusts most. But now he has this full offseason practicing. And then, Cedric Tillman healthy, that influenced the splits last year for Jerry Jeudy. And you have Harold Fannin involved. And so maybe it's more of a spread the ball around offense. You have to be encouraged by, I don't know, Josh Allen scoring like 50 fantasy points against this Ravens defense, but really not one of my favorite spots to go to, but I know you're higher and maybe I'm missing something here.
Yeah, I mean, I just think everyone is so cheap here. We'll talk about the 49ers Saints game later, but it's a bit of a similar situation where the pace should be great for Cleveland. The pass rate's going to be massive because of the spread, and everyone is so cheap. The projectable volume is really good. Flacco, had a really dull game last week, still hit 290 passing yards. Ryan, what do you think of the Brown side here?
Yeah, I think it's solid. I'm probably going to get to some Flacco. In terms of the pass catchers, I think I pretty clearly prefer Cedric Tillman and Harold Fannin over the other guys. But as you said, they all project pretty well. Tillman, I just think, is the wide receiver one on this team. Like, he's out-targeted and outscored Jeudy in all of their last 5 games together. He was leading the team in first read target share as soon as Amari Cooper got traded last year. Like, I think he just kind of is the de facto wide receiver one here, and he's $1,000 cheaper, so that's pretty easy. Fannin I like as well. They obviously made like a very concerted effort to get him on the field in lots of different formations, get a lot of 12 personnel going. He's lining up everywhere. The only thing that concerns me is if we are playing into like a very, very negative game script for the Browns and they have to constantly drop back, do they have to go more 11? Does that keep Fannin off the field some? It's like a tiny thing. He's 3,100. So like not going to overthink it that hard, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I just wouldn't play him like with Derrick Henry if I were playing into like the Ravens just crush them, and I would play Njoku instead in those lineups. But yeah, overall, I think Fannin really solid, Tillman really solid, and definitely want to get to some Flacco.
Yeah, I'm with you. None of these guys are picking up much ownership. Fannin easily going to be the most popular player on the Browns side. So really don't mind, mixing and matching these guys in my Flacco lineups. I'm sure 1 p.m. only I'll have a pretty good amount of Joe Flacco. Scott, on the Ravens side, I mean, this is a picture perfect setup for Derrick Henry. Massive favorites. We always know to play the big dog in game scripts like this. I also think Zay Flowers is fairly interesting here, especially if you think the Browns can put up a bit of a fight at all. Do you have a preference, if maybe you were trotting out a Flacco lineup between Henry and Zay Flowers here?
Yeah, I think Henry is just a great play in his own right. Most game script sensitive player in fantasy history. Last year, 25 DK fantasy points per game in wins, 13.5 in losses. I know some are going to think this is a tough matchup, but Scott DiBenedetto loves this spot for Derrick Henry. That's our O-line guru who was a scout with the Browns for 10 years. And then Zay Flowers. Yeah, you have to be excited after what he did last week, which was, the second best game of his career. He looked awesome. And you wonder if Isaiah Likely's absence doesn't benefit him the most as sort of the design target short area guy. I will just say, if you're going to chase that after a big performance last week, he has been another player, very much a roller coaster to own where, random spike week every 4th game and then a lot of duds in between.
Yeah, certainly think that's reasonable. Ryan, I know you noted this is a pretty strong schematic matchup for Zay Flowers as well.
Yeah, it's awesome for him. Browns play a ton of single high, and that is Flowers' clear best schematic matchup, basically doubling his yards per out run. Last year against single high looks, he had a 50% target share on dropbacks where the Bills were showing single high last week. It's just perfect for him. The Browns nickel corner is a 2024 7th round pick, and Joe Dolan really liked that individual matchup for Flowers as well whenever he moves into the slot. So yeah, I'm playing Flowers within mini stacks and kind of anywhere where I want to play into this game being really good. good. Whereas I think Henry might be the stronger one-off, especially considering ownership.
Yeah, certainly like that take there. I think we covered just about every angle in this one. Let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams at the Tennessee Titans. Rams are 5.5-point favorites. Total here is 41.5. Only notable injury, Colby Parkinson is out. That should mean a few more snaps and routes for Tyler Higbee, although not particularly fantasy relevant. Ryan, I think everybody knows to play Derrick Henry when he's in these super positive game scripts. I'm not sure everybody knows to play Kyren Williams when he's in these really positive game scripts. I think Kyren and Rams defense is a pretty interesting angle here, right?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much the same thing as Derrick Henry, where when he's leading over the last 2 years, Kyren Williams, 62% more fantasy points per snap, over 21 DraftKings fantasy points per game in wins. That's pretty solid at 6,300. And then you stack him with the defense, 5.5-point favorites. Yeah, it's pretty nice. I don't know if it's like the number one place I want to go here. I also just love how condensed this Rams passing game is. I mean, we saw the exact same thing with Puka and Devontae last week as we saw with Puka and Kupp in 2024. Just those two guys got 2/3 of the Rams targets. Nakua was at a 33% target per route run against cover 4 last year, which the Titans like to run a lot of. So I really think that both of them are kind of interesting as one-offs. I don't know if I'd go as far in this game environment to want to double them with Stafford in this game, but I think the receivers are kind of just as interesting as Kyren.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We are projecting, pretty decent ownership here on both Puka and Kyren. Devontae, 7-8% across the industry. But yeah, I'm with you. I think both of these wide receivers are pretty interesting as one-offs. Really like Kyren and the Rams defense as well. Scott, I know you were getting cooked on Twitter for your Cam Ward tweet. Call me crazy, but I am a little interested in Cam Ward, Calvin Ridley, and Ayumanor stacks. Ridley and Ayumanor in particular are projecting really, really well, and they don't really have the ownership to match. Do you have any thoughts there?
I'm probably not going to do that personally. The dude had 4 completions over 5 yards in the air. I think people just have a really low bar because Bo Nix was even worse in that game. And because, Will Levis was like the worst quarterback ever. I will say I do like Calvin Ridley quite a bit. No one's going to play him after he had a dud last week, but that was understandable given it was a Patrick Surtain shadow in the preseason training camp. Cam Ward just locked on to Calvin Ridley. Like, he made it clear. He's like, I know my job. It's to get Calvin Ridley the ball. And so you want to do minis with Puka or Adams and Calvin Ridley. I like that a lot. If you want to play a Stafford double instead of a Kyren lineup, I think you can experiment with that, have Calvin Ridley as the bring back. But yeah, I think this might be a rule I might have every single week is one Rams player on every lineup, or like damn near close to it, just because like Ryan was saying, it's just so condensed. These roles are so valuable, where last year you had the ghost of Cooper Kupp, top 10 in XFP per game, Puka, setting records for XFP per route run. And it looks like Adams' role is even better. His horizontal route rates doubled. I think he's, more talented than Cooper Kupp, and so much fantasy upside. And then Kyren Williams leads the league in red zone XFP per game every single season. So it's just this great, really condensed offense. There has to be some way to attack it, but Rams are always going to be on my radar.
Yeah, certainly think that's reasonable. Don't want to call myself a Cam Ward defender quite yet, but I do think for some super large field stuff, getting a little bit of exposure to a quarterback who's projecting for 1% ownership with a pair of wide receivers who project as top 8 values and also aren't pulling ownership is a little bit interesting. Don't think I have anything else to add on this game. Tony Pollard is projecting well, but I mean, hard to argue for a guy who's, probably a lock for 15 to 18 expected fantasy points and probably a lock to finish with 9 to 12 actual fantasy points. If you think this game shoots out, though, and you want to play into that, maybe you do stack up the Stafford side. Pollard is a little interesting. Led all running backs in both snap share and rush attempt share last week. So certainly want to pay attention to that volume. But if Tennessee can't move the ball here, Pollard is certainly going to struggle. Let's move on to a really fun one. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Cincinnati Bengals. Jags are 3.5-point dogs here. Total is 49.5, and this game is pretty clean from an injury perspective, at least on the fantasy front. I really like the Bengals here. I really like Joe Burrow doubles. If we are to believe anything about, the preseason mattering, Cincinnati trying to fix their early season struggles, Ryan, I think we need to just throw week one out, say, hey, Cincinnati always struggles against the Cleveland Browns. But maybe this is the spot that we finally get an early season shootout with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the price is pretty right on Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. Chase Brown obviously going to be very popular in this one. What do you think of the Bengals side of this game?
Yeah, I think Chase Brown is clearly my favorite play in this game. I mean, Jaguars are coming off allowing the second most schedule adjusted to running backs. They just gave up almost 18 DraftKings points to Chuba Hubbard, even though the Panthers were trailing the entire game. So to me, Brown is like ultra safe, ultra awesome play. But as you said, he's going to be chalky. I can never count out the Bengals doubles, of course, Burrow, Chase Higgins. It's always live. I don't know. For me though, this side of the game is projecting for some more ownership. It's not just week one that the Bengals have struggled in historically. It has been kind of the first month of the season over the last few years. So I don't know. I'm not going to have zero Burrow, Chase Higgins, but I think it's very much, I don't think it's as big of a slam dunk as I felt like the Bengals were last week. I don't know. I am a little psyched out about maybe the Jaguars secondary is actually a lot better with a new defensive coordinator, with Travis Hunter, the best football player of all time, supposedly playing more defense this week. So I don't know. I'm not crazy about it, but obviously these guys can break the slate any given week.
Yeah, it's hard to feel amazing about it after their performance last week, after they're projecting for a ton of ownership. I mean, they do have the second highest implied team total on the week. And even if the Jag secondary is improved, that's not saying much relative to last year. And I mean, when the Bengals are on it, this pass game can just absolutely dominate. Scott, I think one of the tricky parts is if you do want to stack up the Bengals, running it back on the Jacksonville side, hard to use Brian Thomas Jr. That's using up a lot of salary. Travis Etienne looks pretty good as a play. Travis Hunter, I also think looks pretty good. He's in the Chris Godwin role now that me and Ryan were, really hoping he would be in this offseason. I'm curious what you think of the Jaguar side, because I'm sure I can't sell you on Trevor Lawrence at all here.
I mean, I think you can.
Okay. Bengals
are supposed to be, or at least last year, they were the worst defense in football, right? And the volume was there for BTJ. The role was there for Travis Hunter. It's just Trevor Lawrence was orders of magnitude worse than Mac Jones. And so maybe things come around this week. I don't know. I will say my favorite straight up, probably Travis Etienne. We were drooling over the Liam Cohen RB1 role for potentially Basil Tootin in the second half. But right now it's Travis Etienne. 64% backfield XFP share in week one, second most rushing yards in the week, and they just traded Tank Bigsby away. So that's pretty exciting to me. That's a strong value. But of course, Travis Hunter confirmed in the Chris Godwin role. You have to be excited about that as well.
Yeah, certainly excited about that. I think Etienne is a really interesting play. Also interesting to me that he's not really projecting for much ownership. Looking at some of these running backs in the mid 5Ks, I think guys like Javonte, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift are going to soak up a little bit of ownership there, and it might prevent Etienne from showing up in a lot of lineups. But he's a guy that I really like paired with Bengal stacks, or you can do a mini there where maybe a little Etienne, Chase, or Higgins. Also like that with, Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter. I think there's a lot of juice potentially in this game. And I am willing to go back to the well on Trevor Lawrence. I'll let him disappoint me for at least another month before I fully give up there. But yeah, this is a really fun game to stack. I would expect ownership to match there. Let's move on to the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. Chicago is a 6.5-point underdog here. Total is 46.5. Roschon Johnson, no injury designation going into this one, so he should play. Nothing of note on the Lions side. Scott, I thought you had a really interesting angle here. Detroit has the highest implied team total on the slate, and no one really wants to play any Lions outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, who just earned a career high 65% snap share in a game with a healthy David Montgomery. That's certainly encouraging. But I think, maybe stacking up the Lions, stacking up Goff is also a really interesting angle here. Yeah,
I mean, he struggled last week, but it was against what looks like the best defense in football. And it was a road game. We know Jared Goff last 3 years averages 10 more fantasy points per game at home. And 2% ownership, second highest implied point total of the week. And this looks like a great matchup. This defense just gave up the third most fantasy points per dropback in week one, up against a quarterback making his NFL debut. It's a good schematic. I think Ryan could nitpick it, but Nick Football Insights on Twitter, he thinks it's a good schematic. I know the Bears are down their starting slot cornerback. That's good for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But the only counter to this really is just that Ben Johnson maybe knows his quarterback's weaknesses a little better than the average opposing head coach. But like I said, second highest implied points total of the week. No one wants to play it. I like this. I think, if I'm only making 1 milli lineup, I might go with an onslaught of this game.
Yeah. I certainly think that's an interesting angle. I think this game has comparable shootout potential to the Jacksonville-Cincinnati game, and you're not getting anywhere close to the same amount of ownership. Ryan, I'm curious what you think of the Chicago side here. I am a little bit tempted by a 5,400 Caleb Williams. Obviously, all the advanced stats in the data suite for Caleb Williams look pretty gruesome, but he's projecting all right, and DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are also both projecting pretty all right. What do you think of the Bears side here?
Yeah, I think Williams is fine. I think I would clearly prefer the Lions side to stack it from. The most convincing part of that is how the Packers looked last night against the Commanders. That convinced me enough pretty much that we need to give this Lions offense a second chance. But yeah, Williams is fine to me, but the receivers are a lot more interesting. So with Rome Odunze, I feel like a little bit of a crazy person because I am analyzing one game, handful of drop back splits to get into this. But the Ben Johnson slot roll that we talked about all offseason about how amazing it is, it was pretty amazing in week one, but it was just split between all of these different guys almost evenly, between Rome, DJ Moore, and Zacchaeus in the slot. But when you look at the success and the efficiency, Rome Odunze led all NFL receivers in slot average separation score in week one. And what's really interesting is that the Lions were once again man coverage heavy, like we've seen them be in the past. And Ben Johnson has always attacked man coverages with this slot role. We have seen the Ben Johnson Lions slot target share close to double in the past when he sees man coverage. So to me, that's pretty interesting. It could be not Rome Odunze in the slot that he's attacking this through, but Rome performed the best in it last week. I just want to bet on that. He also had the best overall role. He's also really cheap. He also projects really well. This is all just kind of an argument on top of it being a great game environment and projection. But yeah, I really like Rome even as a one-off. DJ Moore is decent enough too. The Lions have been a deep funnel over the last year or so. DJ Moore was kind of playing the deep threat role, leading the team in air yards last week. So I think Moore is also decent, but Odunze is actually who gets me excited, which is pretty funny given the amount of arguing I did about anti-Rome Odunze all offseason.
Yeah, Ryan, the chat is not thrilled that you have sold them on a Chicago player potentially. My only thing here between DJ Moore and Rome Odunze is the ownership. And right now, projected ownership across the industry is looking almost identical for both players. So I'd certainly, and I know Scott prefers Odunze straight up. I think I would prefer Odunze straight up as well, assuming those ownership numbers hold. I do worry that he's the kind of guy who might get steamed a bit later into the weekend. And that could even out how I feel about those two guys. But yeah, this is a really interesting game. I think you could go with either quarterback here and really stack this game up in the hopes that it shoots out in the Dome in Detroit. All right, let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers at the New Orleans Saints. 49ers are 3-point favorites. Total here is 40.5. On the injury front, man, it is rough for the 49ers. No Trent Williams, no George Kittle, no Brock Purdy. Jawan Jennings is listed as questionable. Scott, Mac Jones, 4,000. I feel like we get about one of these a year. And it's in a pretty good offense. We've seen, pretty good games from these Kyle Shanahan QB2s in their spot starts. What do you think of a dirt cheap Mac Jones here?
I love him. I kind of wish he was 800 more, so like even less people would play him. But yeah, 4K is just insane. You could play Mac Jones, you could stack him up, and you can just play whoever else you want on the week. He's probably who I write up as the cash quarterback, right? Even though he's drawing 5-6% in terms of projected ownership. A great stat from Ryan Heath was that for the last 4 seasons, backup 49ers quarterbacks are averaging 18.7 DraftKings fantasy points per game. Clearly that means he's a good value. Josh Dobbs had 29 in week 18 last year. We were all over it. The bad news is Mac Jones is probably a little worse than Josh Dobbs. They're also without Trent Williams, and Juwan is banged up. But I don't know. I want to play Ricky Pearsall. I want to play Christian McCaffrey. I want to play Mac Jones. And there's even some options on the opposite side I think what's going to happen is I think this is going to be one of the rules. This is what Al Zeidenfeld would always talk about is flow chart. You have rules where it's just who is playing this team, make sure you have exposure to whoever's playing that team. And the Saints, because it's not a good team, but because Kellen Moore, deploys such a frenzied pace of play, I think this is going to be a matchup that's right with fantasy goodness every single week. And another great Ryan Heath stat is only 2 teams had wide receivers ranked top 15 in XFP. It was the Giants and the Saints. I think you could add their tight end to that list and you would have 3, right? And so I love stacking up this game. I hope it could be one of those good old fashioned slot fests we talk about, 2 bad teams going against each other, randomly combining for 70 points. This also could just totally blow up in our faces, but I'm excited by it.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good spot for Mac Jones. A big part of it is that we have Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall soaking up just a ton of touches. We know Kyle Shanahan is a guy who's going to get the ball to his guys. So that, that makes it really encouraging when San Francisco is just down so many players. Ryan, I thought you had an interesting angle here just regarding the general pace of this game and also, a little bit of love for the New Orleans side. Why don't you talk about that really quick?
Yeah. So, these 2 teams in week 1, the 49ers and the Saints, they had the 2nd most and the 6th most plays of any team. This is kind of 2 genius play callers going at each other with their hands tied behind their backs because neither of them have great quarterback play. But yeah, as you guys have been saying, I think it could still be fun. Kellen Moore has always had one of the highest pace of plays in the NFL. Shanahan really hasn't, but if he gets into a game script like this, it can be really, really fun. Both of them were top 7 in week 1 in during snap motion rate, which is just a play calling cheat code that kind of shows you who the creative and active play callers are. So yeah, it's just a genius play caller bowl where all of these guys are extremely cheap. And it's the 2nd lowest game total, but also I think the game could kind of go off. And even better, you have all this consolidation on the Saints side. As Scott was saying, the Saints actually had 3 different pass catchers over 18 expected fantasy points last week between Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Juwan Johnson, who's only 3,600, 97% snap share last week. All 3 of these guys are really awesome plays to me. I kind of want to experiment with lineups where I'm just going Mac Jones plus CMC plus Ricky Pearsall. 2 of Juwan, Olave, and Shaheed, and then you can fit whatever you want around it. Like literally, you can play all the most expensive guys, all the best values everywhere else on the slate, just around that core of this game. And I think it's viable. Like I think these, yeah, as I was saying, they're great play callers. This could actually be like a fun game. So yeah, that's going to be like an overwhelming percentage of my entries, unfortunately, is the Mac Jones Bowl.
One stat I had was the last time we saw the 49ers without both Debo and Kittle on the field, Juwan scored 49.5 DraftKings fantasy points. I think that was the most by a 49ers wide receiver ever. And they had Terrell Owens, they had Jerry Rice. And so, yeah, it's just a belief in Kyle Shanahan, a GOAT play caller, and then his offense now being more condensed. I would really strongly favor Pearsall over Juwan. You can also play him. I feel, I know you guys see it a little differently. I feel convicted in Olave. I think to me, if I could only make one lineup this week, it would be Mac Jones, Ricky P, CMC, and Olave.
Yeah.
Oh, and the tight end too is also probably the tight end too in there. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You got to get 2 of them. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Double bring back the Saints.
Yeah, and the tight end. Yeah.
I certainly like that angle. Juwan Johnson, interestingly, I mean, to me, he's like, if not the same caliber of play, a very similar or better play than Harold Fannin. And he's not looking at, the same ownership there. I'm seeing 4, 5, 6% across the board. The usage for Juwan was really, really good last week. Guys, we got about 5 more games to get to here, but we will be back right after this.
This is Nick B, and I'm reading this ad because I was my fantasy league's biggest loser. So if you want to win your fantasy league and make more money, head to fantasypoints.com to get the edge you need.
All right, guys, welcome back to Cashing Points Week 2 edition. We just covered a very exciting San Francisco-New Orleans game that we're both, or all 3 of us, are pretty excited about here. We're going to move to a much more boring game with a comparable total, Seattle Seahawks at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Seahawks are 3-point dogs here. Total is 40.5. On the injury front, no Joey Porter Jr. for Pittsburgh, no Devon Witherspoon for Seattle. So both these teams are without a key piece in the defensive backfield. And Ryan, that kind of plays right into the only 2 plays that I'm interested in this game, and I think the field largely agrees with me. Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf are both projecting pretty well. Why don't you talk about JSN, because his week 1 workload was insane.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 6K. JSN was the only Seahawks receiver to record a positive separation score in week 1, which means there were, I believe, 0 other separation wins on the entire team outside of JSN. Maybe Torrey Horton had 1, and then he had a negative on a different play. Something like that was not good. And it resulted in a 67% first read target share for JSN. He just completely blew out every other receiver in week 1 in all of the usage stats. So yeah, especially with JPJ out, like that makes this pretty sweet to me. The Steelers have also kind of always funneled everything underneath, but number 1, don't know if that even matters with JPJ out. And number 2, JSN's floor is also really awesome. Even in the short field, he saw 3 of the Seahawks 4 screen targets last week. So yeah, he's a sick one-off to me here.
Yeah. The price is very nice on JSN here. Scott,
I think we now have 2 Pukas, Ryan. I think we have 2 Pukas now, and one is 6K.
It was Puka-esque, yeah.
And I want to lock both of them into my DFS lineups this week. JSN even more so. The first read target share, the horizontal route rate, the fact that it's a ton of 2 wide receiver sets. I couldn't feel any more convicted. And then Sam Darnold had a quote after the game, and he was like, well, that's just what the offense called for, and that's what the defense didn't sell out to stop. So that's what we did. Maybe another week it'll be a Cooper Kupp game, but JSN's freaking awesome. Something along those lines. And so, I JSN, I might just lock him in this week.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'm not sure how many Cooper Kupp games we're going to get. That guy looks pretty washed. Scott, I know you had a little bit of love for.
And JPJ might be out, by the way.
Yeah,
don't know if
I
you
mentioned
had
that.
Okay,
But Scott, I know you had a little love for DK Metcalf. He's in a revenge game, and Aaron Rodgers is well known for seeking vengeance. You think he's going to pepper his wide receiver one with targets here?
Dude, absolutely. How much money did Devontae Adams make us down the stretch last year? Because we were just like, oh, he fucking hates Garrett Wilson and he's going to pepper his boy. And so, the hyper vengeful Aaron Rodgers going to shower Metcalf with targets this week. I could see it. I thought DK impressed last week. We weren't expecting that Sauce Gardner shadow. Now that Sauce shadows, that's like an easy bottom 3 matchup that's like playing, the Broncos, right? So, and despite that, we saw some schemed up to an extent, short area stuff for DK. And Seattle's defense, they might not start Reek Woolen. They could be without Devon Witherspoon. Projections love him. So I like it. That's what Rodgers has always done, is just lock on to his boy, his one guy. And that should be DK this week.
Yeah, certainly like that angle. I think both of those plays are very interesting as one-offs. Can also do a pretty good mini stack there if you think this game has a little bit of juice. Let's move on to a game that I think has significantly more juice. New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. Only fantasy relevant injury note in this one is that Darren Waller once again out. Patriots 1.5 point dogs, total 43.5. Drake May, top 3 quarterback value in our projections right now, also draws an awful Miami defense that just gave up 418 total yards to a Daniel Jones offense. Ryan, I know you're the resident Patriots fan here. Can I interest you in any Drake May, Hunter Henry stacks against a defense that seems like a lock at this point to finish bottom 5 in the NFL?
I was on VSiN today with John Hansen, and I told him that you have Hunter Henry posters scattered around your apartment. He laughed.
I may as well. Yeah.
This is your favorite player of all time, right?
Hunter Henry is, I did learn last night after Cage Match, my most drafted player in Best Ball Mania. So that's, that's definitely a thing. I don't know. I feel like I'm not as excited about this as I should be. It could definitely just be like Patriots fan nihilism, but we didn't see the role for Drake May that we were kind of expecting. Only one designed run in week 1. Now that could just be a 1 game sample type of thing, but also, it's hard to like totally hate it at just 5,200, a guy that can scramble, that can get there that way. Henry is probably going to be my favorite stack. I mean, we saw the Dolphins just allow a 24% target share to players lined up in line in week 1. That's a fancy way to say that Tyler Warren totally torched them. But I mean, that's also nice to see. Hunter Henry's role was honestly even better than I expected. A ton of air yards, 117 air yards for Hunter Henry last week, 8 targets, tied with Kayshon Boutte, who's a little bit banged up, it sounds like. So yeah, I think May to Henry is decent, but I'm honestly more excited about the other side of this game, as we'll get to.
Yeah, the Miami side is a little bit interesting here. I did just want to throw out for Boutte, no injury designation going into this game. He did have some limited practices.
I like him a lot. I think he's a great player.
Week. Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking too, Scott. 138 air yards, 15.2 expected fantasy points. He's 4,500. No one's going to play him. It doesn't look like Drake May is going to be particularly popular either, despite projecting quite well.
Yeah, Drake May is an amazing play. Like, Miami probably has the worst secondary in football. I know there weren't any design runs, but it was the first game in a new system. This is my Exodia quarterback. I'm not willing to give up on it yet. But Kayshon Boutte, 4,500, 2% ownership. To me, he looks like clearly New England's wide receiver 1, or at least until Diggs works his way back. If he ever works his way, like, what was it, a 55% route share? But like, here's a stat that might blow your mind. Kayshon Boutte over his last 4 games, 19.3, 27.7, 6.8, 20.5 DK fantasy points. So over 19 in 3 of his last 4. And this was like this is Justin Ross 2.0 basically, where he was this amazing.
I've been waiting all week for you to make that comparison, Scott. I knew it was coming. I knew we would get it eventually.
Folks, I
agree, to be
Justin
clear.
Ross. So you have that to look forward to. Another guy who you'll never make any money on, and I will talk about on every show. So yeah, but we can pivot back to Miami, but I think May stacks are very live.
Yeah, I love the Justin Ross comparison. At least Booty actually plays. That's generally pretty important to when it comes to scoring fantasy points. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Miami side? This offense was obviously a total disaster last week. I mean, it was a brutal watch. Devon Achane is really the only guy that the field is interested in. No one wants to play Tua. Really, nobody wants to play Tyreek or Jalen Waddle. But man, the prices on these guys are pretty good. And if you assume that any of Miami's past competence could roll over into this game, there might be a little bit of juice here. What do you think?
Yeah, so first I'll just say with Achane, really solid play. The upside might not be as high as we expect, just based on Ollie Gordon getting the only carry inside the 10-yard line last week. That's a little bit concerning. I mean, all last year, I feel like we were tilting the Achane, Raheem Mostert goal line split. So expect that again. Good play, projects well, no real issues there. But yeah, the passing game is very interesting to me because obviously it was as you said, an unmitigated disaster. All of these turnovers, Tua played horrible. But if you ignore all that, I want to be like Warren Buffett with the Miami Dolphins this week. I want to be greedy when everyone else is fearful because we saw this offense kind of condense back to what it used to be in 2023 when it was sick and when it was shipping the millie every 3 weeks. Just looking at the percent of targets that the Dolphins threw to wide receivers. In 2023, it was 68%, ultra condensed. In 2024, that fell to just 50% of their targets because, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith, they totally turned their offense inside out. They're throwing all these tight ends and running backs. Week 1, back up to a 63% target share for their wide receivers. Both Tyreek and Waddle spent a bunch of time in the Blue Medical tent in week 1 as well. So I get it. None of their XFP, none of their stats look great. The Dolphins also did not run very many plays because, again, Tua kept turning it over and killing all of these drives. But we just saw this New England defense give up over 10 yards per attempt to Geno Smith, the most passing yards on throws 20 or more yards downfield. All of these Mike Vrabel defenses always kind of sell out to stop the run. He always wants to be top of the league in run defense. And that did not go well in week 1. It's not going to go well in week 2, I'm guessing, without Christian Gonzalez again. So yeah, I am unfortunately very, very into these Tua doubles. You can do it to a Tyreek Waddle. You can go to a Achane Tyreek. That's probably my preferred way to go. But yeah, I think Dolphin stacks in tournaments are really, really interesting.
Yeah, they certainly are when there's just not going to be any ownership there. And we have seen the upside. And there's just no way Tua can play as bad as he did last week again, right? I mean, that feels pretty unlikely. I hope at least. All right, let's move on here to the first of just 3 afternoon games. Carolina Panthers at the Arizona Cardinals. Panthers are 6.5-point underdogs here. Total is 44.5. Thankfully, a nice clean game from an injury perspective. Scott, let's start with the Cardinals side. They're favored. Their implied team total is rather solid this week. I feel like it's been years since we've had a Cardinals game really shoot out and really matter for DFS, but I do think there are some interesting one-off options here. One of those guys that you highlighted in your slate breakdown, which will be up on fantasypoints.com tomorrow, was Trey McBride. What are your thoughts on the stud tight end?
Yeah, well, it's a perfect schematic matchup, as Ryan can point to. But you look at his usage and volume. Week 1 was terrific, 28% target share. About in line with what it was last year when he finished top 7 among all players at all positions. It's been interesting to note, since their bye, before their bye last year, they were bottom 5 most, or one of the top 5 most run heavy offenses. Then coming out of their bye since then, and in week 1 as well, they've been closer to top 6 and how pass heavy they are. And over that span, Trey McBride, 11.4 targets per game. That's more than any other receiver over that stretch. 82 yards per game, top 10 amongst wide receivers. I would love if he could just start scoring touchdowns, but keeps coming close. He's a really good value on DraftKings, maybe an even better value on FanDuel. I also wanted to write James Conner up. I didn't. We know that Trey Benson was more involved than we were expecting, but Connor's still top 10 in XFP at the position, or top 12. And it's a Panthers defense that, gave up the most fantasy points per game by a mile to running backs last year. So I think that's interesting, can stack it up, but I would say Trey McBride for sure. My favorite play on this side.
Yeah, certainly makes sense there. Ryan, I'm curious what you think, or if you have anything to add on the Arizona side, or on this game in general. Not a ton that stands out to me. Love the Trey McBride call. I think Tet is really interesting in this one after, he had the role that we were all hoping for, looked really good. Bryce Young just played a terrible, terrible game. And I say that wasn't even a bottom 3 game of Bryce Young's career, because he has had some really bad games in there. But yeah, Ryan, what are your general thoughts on this game here?
Yeah, McBride against a cover 3 heavy matchup, I'm always going to want. He did disappoint us in this spot in week 16 against the Panthers last year, notably. But I kind of went on a rant about this in advanced matchups. But I think that basically at that point in time, the Cardinals were very sensitive about people being critical of their Marvin Harrison rookie season handling. They were kind of like coddling him in every press conference, like forcing targets to him. I don't think they make that mistake again, especially after he had like a good week 1. So I don't think that's going to be like a pressure. So yeah, McBride, one of my favorite plays at tight end of the slate. I'm kind of not interested in the Panthers side at all. Like, it's hard to argue the volume with Tet McMillan, awesome player that I love, obviously, 16.8 XFP last week, but the Cardinals just kind of ruin like every opposing offense. They just funnel everything underneath. They make every team dink and dunk a ton against them. The 4th fewest yards per game allowed on the deep ball since the start of last year. I just don't really see like the explosive upside for anybody on this Panthers team. I started typing Hunter Renfro's name in advanced matchups, and I was like, what am I doing? Like this just means I should not play this passing game whatsoever. So that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm interested in McBride, but I could see like the Connor, maybe he just gets there on 60% of the carries. But anything else in this game, I'm not really touching.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you wanted to go really contrarian with it, you could just say Panthers win the game. Give me Chuba Hubbard plus Panthers defense. I could certainly see the Cardinals choking this one away. And, for a 3-game 4 p.m. slate, if you are playing 4 p.m. only, I do think that's a bit of an interesting angle there. But yeah, I'm with you. Hard to love this Panthers side. Let's move on to the second of 3 4 p.m. games here. Denver Broncos at the Indianapolis Colts. Total here is 43.5. Broncos are favored by 2.5 points. Evan Ingram good to go for this game after a couple visits to the Blue Medical tent last week. Scott, can I interest you in a little Bo Nix after the worst game of his career? We know who to stack him with. It's going to be Cortland Sutton, and Double J in the comments wants to play Bo Nix like Ryan wants to play Tua. Any chance at a bounce back here?
Maybe, probably not going to be in my pool, but I do have some love for Cortland Sutton. Like you said, it was the worst game of Bo Nix's career. Still scored 18 fantasy points over his last 11, 8.7 targets, 18.1 fantasy points per game. Really safe play for cash even. If he was a little cheaper maybe, but he's exceeded 16 fantasy points in 73% of those games. Indianapolis is down starting cornerback Trevarius Ward and his direct backup. So pretty good value. I think he's going to fly under the radar this week. I think you can quibble with his upside, but I think he's a good play.
Yeah, certainly think Sutton's pretty interesting. I'm with you. Likely flies under the radar. Ryan, curious on the Colts side of this one, Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Warren both feel underpriced. Obviously a tough matchup though. I have a hard time liking any more than, a couple one-offs. I like Sutton. You could convince me on Taylor, maybe Warren too. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Just with Taylor, like he's only at 14.7 fantasy points per game in his losses over the last 2 years. It is only a 2.5 point spread. So I think you could play an angle of the Colts surprise here. I am more of the mind that we're going to see the real Daniel Jones this week against this Broncos pass rush. The receivers are also all just kind of really tough, like whether Pat Surtain like shadows anybody or not. All of them were just way worse against man coverage last year, which is what the Broncos love to play. Really only Tyler Warren on the Colts side kind of gets me excited at all. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with a 31% target share. He just completely made Josh Downs like not a thing. But the only thing to watch there is the kind of the reason that happened is the Colts, who have always been like a heavy 11 personnel team, which is why Josh Downs has been like a good player in the past, has gotten on the field as a slot only receiver. They decided not to do that in week one. They played their highest rate of 12 personnel that I could find in the Shane Steichen era. So there's like a small chance that switches back. I mean, Tyler Warren is still going to be on the field even in 11. Maybe he's competing a little harder against Josh Downs, who I think is a better target earner than Pittman or Pierce. But either way, like I think Warren's the only guy I'm interested in at 4,500. That's pretty solid, but yeah, just nothing in this game really gets me that excited.
Yeah, certainly think that's reasonable. Could very easily see this game playing quite slow. Let's get to the final game of the slate. Super Bowl rematch. Philadelphia Eagles are 1.5 point favorites at the Kansas City Chiefs. Total here is 46.5. I think this single-handedly explains the 3-game 4 p.m. slate. All eyes will be on the Super Bowl rematch. No eyes will be on Dallas Goedert because he is out in this game. Also no Xavier Worthy on the Chiefs side after his friendly fire incident with Travis Kelce. This is another game where it feels pretty tricky to stack up, Scott, but there are a lot of interesting one-offs, the most popular of which will very easily be Hollywood Brown. What are your thoughts on 20% owned is what I'm seeing across the industry right now for a 5,200 Hollywood Brown? It just doesn't really feel like there's anywhere else for targets to go. Yeah,
so he's a pretty easy fade for tournaments just because he's Hollywood Brown and he's going to be the chalkiest wide receiver of the slate. I think you play him in cash, but that's an easy fade for tournaments. I think there's a decent chance like we see Travis Kelce get that Rashee Rice role because he had that last year, and sure, it was Hollywood Brown in week one, but they came into that game. The announcers kept saying the plan to force feed Xavier Worthy the ball, and Hollywood stepped into that with his 14 or 16 targets. But maybe this week it's Travis Kelce. So tournaments, probably not going to have exposure to any of those guys unless it's a game stack, which you could game stack it. I know the over under is like what, fourth most on the slate, but it looks like it's like one of those where it could be this disgusting, grueling defensive matchup, or it could just go nuclear. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I'm playing Hollywood.
Yeah. Certainly think that's reasonable.
Kelce, I guess, is leverage, but he's not even too low owned either.
Yeah, Kelce's projecting for, I'm seeing like 8 to 12% across the industry. He is only 5K, and that really is the only other place that targets could go. After that, we're talking Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton, running lots of routes there on the Kansas City side of this game. Ryan, curious what you think about the Eagles side here. Saquon is the kind of guy who could break any slate. We saw 5 games of 36 plus fantasy points from him, or DraftKings points from him last year. Even more interesting, though, I think are the pass catchers here. No Dallas Goedert should open things up a little bit more for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith if the Eagles attempt more than the 23 passes that they did in week one. What do you think on the Eagles side here?
Yeah, so I'll start with Saquon, and I guess I should preface that like nobody in the industry has been owned harder by Saquon Barkley than I have. It feels like so maybe like take that into context with what I'm about to say. But yeah, in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs completely stuffed him. He was at just 2.3 yards per carry. 76% of his runs were stuffed. just over 1 yard before contact per attempt. Why are we not just playing Derrick Henry when he's only $200 more? He's in like a much better game environment. Their ownership, Henry is actually projecting slightly lower. Like I would just rather play Derrick Henry in like any lineup where I think that Saquon would fit. But yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry also owns me a ton. That either of these guys can do it any given week. So surely it'll be the one that I don't have in my DFS lineups.
These were the two best run defenses in football last year. Chiefs run defense looked great last week, and you saw the Chargers come out, lean way more pass heavy. What is Patrick Mahomes 5% ownership? Or Jalen Hurts in a more concentrated offense? Could this be the game that just kind of blows up the week? Because I didn't write it up as such, because it's like Josh Allen's a better play than Jalen Hurts. I want to fade Hollywood at ownership, but maybe that's an angle here.
No, I certainly think that's an interesting angle. Especially with, the prices on, especially these Eagles guys, Hurts at 6,800, AJ Brown 66, Devontae Smith 5,600. That's pretty good. And that's certainly a lot better than what we're going to get in a couple months here from the Eagles. So I do like that as a tournament angle. Ryan, anything else to add on this game before we wrap it up here?
Not really, just like a quick note. I guess if I'm going for one-offs, I'm going to slightly prefer Devontae Smith, just because my vibe is that he's healthier. He didn't have 0 separation wins in week 1. And also the Chiefs have always been a little bit more of a slot funnel. We've seen Smith get a little bit more of that usage, at least in recent history. His splits are a little bit better without Dallas Goedert than AJ Brown's are. So for one-offs, I think it's Smith. I don't love either of these guys. I do really like the Jalen Hurts doubles angle, though. That is pretty interesting, just because, he can blow up a slate just by falling into the tush push a couple times. And then you just need his pass catchers to get there.
Yeah, certainly like that. I think if I had to pick a one-off, I would lean AJ Brown, if only because Devontae Smith has not owned Scott Barrett online in the last 7 days. So that makes it an easy decision. Honestly,
who in Tennessee hasn't?
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right, guys, that will do it for the week 2 edition of Cashing Points. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you're interested in grabbing a Fantasy Points sub, promo code BetSmart will save you 15% on an all-in sub. If you want to be like Ryan Heath and pull some dank stats, that is where you want to look. But yeah, really appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see you all at the top of the leaderboards.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.